Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing some interactive Cuckoo Clock cards created with the Cuckoo Clock Cottage collection from Spellbinders. There is the Cuckoo Clock die set, and then to change it to different seasons, you can use the Harvest Time companion die set, and this has all sorts of fall and autumn things to go with that main Cuckoo Clock die set. And then we have the Chiming Christmas set, perfect for winter and Christmas decorations for that Cuckoo Clock. So I'm going to be using both of these. I'm going to be making just a basic Cuckoo Clock card, and then one for the fall and one for Christmas. And then perfect sentiments in this Cuckoo Cottage sentiments die set, or press plate and die set here. So I'll be making some sentiments with that as well. And I'm going to start off with the sentiments. I always like to start off with the sentiments so I have them ready to go to grab while I'm creating my cards. So I'm using just some hammermill cardstock for doing my sentiments on. I'm going to heat emboss them. I'm going to do one set with rose gold embossing powder and one set with silver embossing powder. My main clock, or my just any season clock, and my harvest one is going to go really well with the rose gold embossed sentiments. And then my winter one is going to go well with some silver embossed sentiments. So any extra sentiments I have, I'll put in a little Ziploc bag and I'll save them for future projects. But I love the fact that they have sentiments in here that are perfect for not only the seasons, but just basic ones. So my first card is actually going to be a birthday card, which is perfect for this. So I put my plate on my BetterPress base after taping my cardstock in place. I'm only putting the sentiments on half of this piece of cardstock, and I'm embossing it first with the rose gold embossing powder. I used Versamark ink for that powder to stick to. I love how the BetterPress system lets you use different inks as well as different cardstock, so it makes it really easy to do these heat embossed sentiments as well as just regular sentiments with ink. You don't have to do heat embossing, but I always like the extra touch that it gives when you do the heat embossing and you have that metallic sentiment that has that raised surface to it. So I melt it with my embossing tool, and once everything is melted, I can tape that back onto the clear plate of my BetterPress system. Just as I was about to do that, I realized there was an area that wasn't quite melted, so I wanted to do that a moment just before taping that paper back in place. Now this plate covers half of the cardstock, so it works perfectly to do two in the one piece of cardstock. Obviously, if it was a little bit bigger, I would use two different pieces of cardstock to do these sentiments so that they didn't accidentally overlap each other. Once again, I am inking that press plate with that Versamark ink, putting the clear plate to the base and then running it through my Platinum 6 machine for that pressure to press those sentiments into that cardstock. When possible, when doing my heat embossed sentiments with press plates, I like to use superfine embossing powder. It just gives a little bit more detail than regular embossing powder. Now the rose gold, the one that I had was just regular embossing powder. The silver one is superfine embossing powder. So if I don't have it and I want a certain color, I will still use that embossing powder, but I do prefer the results with that superfine. So if you have that superfine available, just try it out and see the difference in the results. It's not super easy to see on video, but you get just a touch more detail with that superfine, so I do like to use it when possible. For the backgrounds for my cards, I want to add a little bit of texture, but I want it to be subtle. I do regularly like to do embossing, but because this is an interactive die set and the little pendulum on the center of the clock swings, I find that embossing kind of hinges or interferes with that, and it doesn't swing quite as easily. So rather than using embossing plates, I'm using some press plate backgrounds to create just a little bit of texture for my background. So the first one here that I'm using is the Petite Crisscross press plate. I am using BetterPress cardstock because the press plates show that pressed image a little bit better with BetterPress cardstock. I did ink my plates with Versamark ink just to get that tone-on-tone look. I don't want a lot of pattern here. I don't want it to interfere with my die cut focal point, but I just want a little bit of interest in that background. So I thought using that Versamark would give that interest by having that tone-on-tone pattern. If you wanted it to be a little bit more pronounced, you could just use an ink that is, say, a little shade darker than your paper or whatever color you want. I have pieces of cardstock here that are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, and I have them taped to my plate, and then I am inking the press plate, putting it through my Platinum 6 machine to press that in. Now you could even do this without ink, because for these ones here, that ink is very, very subtle. It's not very prominent at all. So if you did it without ink, you would get a very similar result. Another option would be to do these press plate backgrounds and then not have ink on the press plate at all, and then just do a little bit of ink blending to color that background, and then you'd see that pattern just a little bit more with that. Now these pieces here are A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch. I find out halfway through or towards the end of creating my die cut focal piece for the first card that these are not going to fit on A2 card bases. So I had thought I was going to have a larger area for my clock to go on, and I do end up having to cut these down. So I don't have quite as much of these pattern backgrounds as I would like because of the size of these press plates. There's not a lot of background press plates that are the 5 by 7 size. So I still use them anyways. They don't cover quite as much surface as I originally had hoped, but that's okay. Sometimes in the middle of creating, we need to have some creative changes. So after doing those press plate backgrounds, I take out the die that goes with the Cuckoo Cottage Sentiments press plate and die set and cut out those sentiments. I do like to use some Best Ever craft tape in order to tape those dies down in place so that they don't move and shift on me while I'm doing my die cutting. So I do one of the colors first, and then I go and change that die and do the other one, making sure that those sentiments are nice and centered on there. This way I have those sentiments ready to go while I'm card making. I can just pick and choose which one is going to work best for what I'm creating. And I love it when you can create a bunch of sentiments all at once and die cut them all at once. It makes it so handy to use. So with those ready to go, I'm ready to start creating my first card. So for the first card, I'm only using that Cuckoo Cottage die set, and I have the pieces die cut out of some Fawn Cardstock for the base, some Truffle Cardstock for the accents, and then some Alabaster Cardstock for the light cream pieces. I'm pairing it with some rose gold treasured cardstock, and I have chosen the matte finish. I wanted to have some metallic accents on these cards, and I thought the rose gold worked really well with the colors that I chose for the clock. So anytime I'm gluing these pieces together, I'm using some Barely Art glue in a fine line bottle. It makes it really easy to glue my pieces together as well as gluing my whole cards together. I can do as much as a little dot of glue or cover a background if I need it. As I put my pieces in place, and this was the first clock I did, so I didn't really realize that that roof kind of lined up to the base of the roof. I thought it was raised a little bit, and so it looks like I'm trying to figure it out while I am assembling, and that's part of it, is when the first time you're assembling a die set, sometimes you make assumptions and they get corrected while you're creating. So as I'm creating and gluing pieces together, I have a large acrylic block here that I just place on my die cut so that it holds everything nice and flat while drying. It frees up my hands to glue other pieces together while I'm doing that as well. So for these chains and things that hang off the cuckoo clock, this is what I die cut with that rose gold matte cardstock, and I also die cut some pieces for my clock, the little hands of the clock. When you're gluing them together, it glues together really well with the liquid glue. However, because these are specialty cardstocks and they are coated, it does take a little bit longer for them to dry. That glue likes to slip on these because of that coating. If by chance you get a little bit of glue on there, you can easily clean it off with a damp cloth, but you do want to give it just a little bit longer to dry. There's a little circle die cut that gets glued to that pendulum piece. I thought it would look nice at the bottom, but once I put it at the bottom, it just didn't really suit it, so I put it partly up the way the front of the die set shows. Then I'm ready to assemble the clock. Now, obviously, you can put whatever time you want for the clock. This one's going to be a birthday card, and I thought it would be fun if you knew the time that that person was born. It would be fun to have that on the clock. Here, for these cards, I'm just doing random times for them, making sure that they're all a little bit different, but it's just a fun way to personalize something if you knew that information. There's some little accent pieces and some little door pieces. I am making sure for each one of the clocks, I'm making 3 different cards to use different accent pieces for them, so they're not all exactly the same. And I love the fact that with these die sets, there are many different options, so you can personalize them. And even with the Harvest Time and the Chiming Christmas sets, Yeah, they're meant to be companion dies for the Cuckoo Cottage die set, but you could easily use them as pieces for other cards as well. I have another video where I'm using the gnome from the Harvest Time as one of the focal pieces on that particular card. So I love the fact that there are so many different options. It gives you many options for other creating as well. So as I'm gluing these pieces together, I'm working from the back of the card or the back of the clock to the front, making sure that I have space to move everything and that I'm not putting something where I want something behind it. And that's something I typically do when I'm assembling things. However, sometimes when I'm assembling things, I forget about a certain element and I need to place something behind it. That's another nice thing about using a liquid glue. It doesn't dry right away or doesn't start to catch right away. So you do have a little bit of freedom to tuck things behind if you need it. You have a little bit of time forgiveness there. For my main clock in the middle, I have some foam pop dots that are fairly thin that I'm just putting on there just to give it a little bit of dimension. I don't want it to have a lot of dimension. I'm using these same foam pop dots for my pendulum piece and to raise that clock from the back of my card base. However, for those pieces there, I have them doubled up. So I've put 2 different pop dots on top of each other because the ones that I ran out of the ones that I was using. Couldn't get those anymore, and the ones that I was able to get were really quite thin and I wanted them to have a little bit more dimension, but I did that off screen, so you don't have to watch me do that. So after doing the main clock piece, I'm going to hang these things off of the back and I'm going to let that glue dry before I start to assemble my card. I want to make sure that they're dry because these are those metallic cardstocks, and as I was talking about before, because they take a little bit longer to dry, I want to make sure that they don't fall off of my piece. And this is the point where I realized that this was not going to fit on an A2 card, that it was just a little bit too big. When I was prepping, I was thinking about the main cuckoo clock. I wasn't thinking about the things hanging down from it. So off screen, I created some 5x7 cards. I have some mats for each of the cards that are cut to 4.5 by 6.5. And those press plate backgrounds that I did that were 4.25 by 5.5, I kept them the 5.5 inch length, but I made them 3.5 inches wide so that we have an even mat all the way around. So I'm going to glue down my colorful mat. This one was done with that Truffle Cardstock. I tried to choose the accent colors that I was using on my clock as my mats just to kind of frame the whole thing in. And like I said before, this press plate piece is smaller than I was wanting it to be, but sometimes while we're creating, we need to come up with some creative solutions. So one of the sentiments I put on the inside of the card, and then another one I put on the top part right on the mat so that it shows up nice and easy, or nice and well. Then I need to glue down that pendulum piece. Now, when I layered my pop dots off screen, I made an assumption as to what size the circle for the inside of this die cut was. So these pop dots are actually just a little bit too big. So after putting it down, it actually taped down or glued down my little pendulum piece there. I cut it or rubbed them off. I'm also going to use some embossing powder tool to make sure that there is no sticky areas for that die cut to stick to. And then I took some smaller pop dots and layered those together. I'm going to put my clock down first to see where this piece goes, then hold it down in place and put that circle there, put that pop dot there. Now, when you're die cutting the metallic papers, the specialty cardstocks, they like to curl. So I just use my fingers to uncurl them while I'm creating. So you definitely want to do that before assembling. It's a lot easier to do it before everything's assembled. When putting foam pop dots on the back of the cuckoo clock, and you have to do it on the back of this because we have that pendulum piece with that foam pop dot raised, you need to raise the cuckoo clock so that it is even with that. You do want to make sure to avoid putting foam pop dots towards the bottom so that you leave room for that pendulum piece to swing. Now, the other thing, because I had to change the pop dot that I was using, sometimes it likes to stick on the edge of that foam pop dot because I have 2 raised together and they might not be aligned perfectly. The solution to that is, after putting those pop dots on top of each other, using some embossing powder tool to stick on any sticky bits that they might stick to. So before creating my next two, I put those foam pop dots together, put some of that embossing powder tool around the edges, just so there was no sticky bits on the outside. It definitely helps, and for the next cards, they swing just a little bit better. For my second card here, I'm using that same Cuckoo Clock base, and I assembled it off screen. It's the same assembly as the first card. I chose a few different colors and I chose a few different options on the base of the clock. But for decorating the rest of the clock, I'm using the Harvest Time die cuts. So I have some pumpkins cut, I have some mushrooms cut, I have a large acorn cut. That one is going to hang on the little pendulum piece. And then I have the squirrels. There's a few different options here, and obviously not everything is going to fit on this clock all at once. So it's just fun to customize and pick and choose which pieces you want to use. There's also some really teeny tiny acorn die cuts that I'm going to have my little squirrels holding. So after those are assembled, I'm going to take the little arms of the squirrels. There's a little cut between them. I'll put some glue on the front part and some on the back part and put those acorns between there, so it's going to look like the little squirrels are holding them in place. Now, I chose not to do any ink blending on these cards because there are so many die cuts. There's a whole lot going on. You could easily do some ink blending if you wanted to give them a little bit more visual dimension like that. I didn't find that it really was necessary, but that's definitely an option. And like I said, there's a whole lot going on, so you don't miss it if you don't do it. So this one, just like my first clock, I used that rose gold cardstock, the matte finish, for some of the metallic pieces on here. My base of my clock was die cut out of Alabaster Cardstock, and the trim pieces were die cut out of some cinnamon cardstock. I also use that cinnamon cardstock to do the upper layer of one of those hanging pieces, one of the hanging chains on this particular clock. And I like the contrast of the plain cinnamon cardstock with that rose gold cardstock. Now, I like to put my decorations on my clock before adding it to the base of the card or the card base, but you could, if you wanted, assemble these pieces on afterwards. Once you have your main clock piece, you could put that on the card front and then add the decorations afterwards if you want. I'm using that same Bearly Art glue. For the pieces that go off of the clock, I want to make sure to only put the glue on the pieces that have contact with that clock to make sure that I don't have adhesive where I don't want it to go. Last step here is to add those mushrooms, and I have a large one and a small one for each side so that we have some balance to our clock decorations. Then I'm ready to start assembling my cards. So my mat here was done out of that cinnamon cardstock. I have the buffalo plaid press plate here that I used for this background. It was trimmed to 3.5 inches by 5.5 inches. And then we can add our clock to the front. So I always like to put my clock on there ahead of time to figure out exactly where I want my sentiment. I wanted my sentiment for this one to go in a different place from the first card. And there's enough room with this larger card size to be able to easily do that. And you can even leave it off the front and put it on the inside and just have that sentiment there. But sometimes it's nice to have them on the front. Sometimes it's nice to have them on the inside. Just depends. So I have that smaller pop dot there that I put in the middle of the pendulum piece. Can add those pop dots to the back of the cuckoo clock. Again, making sure not to put any towards the bottom. I will put some towards the bottom to the side, and then mainly the rest are on the top part to support it. I want to make sure that I have lots of room for the little pendulum piece to swing freely. So putting that clock on there, making sure that everything is nice and secure. And there we have our second card with the harvest theme to it. And then the sentiment is also harvest themed, so it goes well with those decorations as well. For my third card, I am pairing that Cuckoo Cottage die set with the Chiming Christmas. I've chosen a red and white theme here, and the accents are in silver. So my my Cuckoo Clock base is classic white cardstock. The accents there are made with die cut from Cranberry Cardstock. I have some snow bits to go on the top here that are die cut from glittered cardstock from the antique white treasured cardstock pack. Now the glitter cardstock from that pack has some silver glitter in it, so it goes really well with the matte silver die cut pieces that I have for the little pendulum piece and the clock hands. The tree here is die cut from antique white cardstock, and then I have some Rainforest cardstock for those accent pieces. Again, with this die set, there are many different options to use. I chose to do the deer. I thought they were adorable and could go with either Christmas or winter. You can pick and choose. So I chose to do the deer facing each other, very similar to the squirrels. But I really liked the little horn or the little antlers that they had, as well as the scarves. And then the little piece at the bottom looks like a candy cane, and I love that little detail to it. Worked perfectly. And that's why I chose the red and white theme to it, because I thought those candy cane bits would look best in that red and white, but you could also add green to it if you wanted. So I glue that on, and then I'm ready to assemble the snowman. The base of the snowman was die cut out of some Raven cardstock. The body of the snowman is die cut from that same glitter cardstock that the glitter bits on the roof were die cut out of. Now, those glitter cardstocks from the treasured cardstock packs, they die cut like a dream. The specialty ones as well, there are no issues with die cutting them. Some glitter cardstocks are hard to die cut, and especially with detailed dies like this, these glitter cardstocks cut so easily and so well. I've never had an issue with any of them. So once I have the main pieces assembled off of my clock, now I'm ready to add them to the clock. Now, typically when I'm assembling pieces, I like things kind of visually balanced, and to me, having a bright green tree on the one side kind of takes it off balance. You can easily change it and move it to the middle, but then we have it off balance with the snowman. So I decided to just go with what I originally had planned, was putting the snowman on one side, the tree on the other, and then the reindeer in front of it. Again, so many different options, so you can easily change this up if it bothers you. So I tuck my clock to the side for that glue to dry, especially those main pieces of specialty cardstock that take a little bit longer to dry, adding those layers to the background of my 5x7 card base. So the big mat here is done with that cranberry cardstock die cut or trimmed down to 4.5 by 6.5, and then my press plate, and this one is the Snowfall Shimmer press plate background. That one was trimmed to 3.5 by 5.5. I glued my sentiment to the bottom here and ready to start assembling and adding that pendulum. So adding the clock to the card base is exactly the same for every single one. That pendulum basically goes in the same spot with the clock. You can't really, I guess you could get creative with it, but it typically goes in the center. Now there is in this die set, the Chiming Christmas die set, also a peppermint candy that you can add as a detail to that pendulum piece. I opted not to. One of the things with this set that, and it's just my brain because my brain is like this, I wished there was three different ornament choices for that those chains with the ornaments on there. For my brain, it bothers me that they're two different ornaments. In hindsight, and this was a solution that I thought of after the whole card was done, what I would do if I were to do this card again is do two of the same on the outer sides and then do a third one and just cut off the ornament piece and glue that to the pendulum. I think that for myself, for my brain, would be more visually appealing. I like it the way it is because those ornaments are the same color, but my brain doesn't like that they're two different ones and that they're an even number rather than an odd number. So if your brain is like my brain, that is the way to fix it. But I absolutely love that there are companion dies with that main Cuckoo Cottage set to create cards that are seasonal and sentiments that go with them for those seasons, as well as for main holidays as well. So first we have that Christmas card there, then we have this harvest one, and so many different shades of cardstock that it makes it perfect to customize your color palette to go with the different themes. I love that rose gold cardstock with the fall and with that birthday theme. I think they turned out really, really well with those colors. And here's the main card just done with that Cuckoo Cottage die set. This one was turned into a birthday card. It says time to celebrate, and then something about you're being timeless or something on the inside. I can't remember the exact sentiment that I chose for this one, but there are several different options. So I love the fact there are different ones to choose from. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time that you spend with me. Have a fantastic day.